Next, from Springfield, we talked to former state senator and current chairman of the Regional Transportation Authority, Kirk Dillard, on how a lack of funding due to the state budget impasse is affecting mass transit in Chicago. This runs about 15 minutes.
Former Senator Kirk Dillard, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois Channel. We haven't seen you for a while. You're here at the state capitol. What brings you down from Chicago?
Primarily to make sure that mass transit in northeastern Illinois is not on the chopping block. I know there's a lot of worthwhile causes here, and I'm very sympathetic to higher education and those that are people with disabilities and others who have budgetary issues. But every day, 2 million people ride the regional transportation system in Chicago. 70% of all people who work in the central business district of Chicago or the South Loop take mass transit to get to work. In Chicago, we don't have yellow school buses. School children, whether it's parochial school children, charter schools, or public schools, take the CTA to get to school. And just want to make sure that budgetarily the RTA continues to flow well in Metropolitan Chicagoland.
For those who live downstate, just give us a thumbnail sketch of your system. How much of a territory do you cover? How far in the metropolitan area? And just what are the different modes of transportation in your network?
It's the 6-county metropolitan Chicago area. And so it's the Chicago Transit Authority, so the iconic elevated trains, CTA buses, Metro, the commuter rails, the double-decker cars, and PACE, the suburban bus system, is all under the umbrella of the RTA. A lot of people don't know that PACE, the suburban bus system, moves people with disabilities for the city of Chicago. But it's 2 million riders a day. It's the second largest mass transit system in America. I'm always fast to say that we have the lowest operating cost per mile of any major mass transit system in America, the fewest breakdowns per mile, all with a system where a third of our rolling stock is past its useful life. We also, we're standing in the state capitol, proudly have almost perfect credit rating with Wall Street, and our pension plan is fully funded. So we run things pretty well. And without mass transit in Chicago, if you're a visitor, you live up there, if we just didn't have Metro, not the CTA, but Metro, the suburban commuter rail, you'd need 37 more lanes of highways, which we obviously couldn't afford, and we don't have the room for it in Chicago. So mass transit is an integral part of Illinois' economy. And again, if you're a school child in the city of Chicago, whether you go to a parochial school or a public school, the CTA is your yellow school bus.
Yeah, I was going to say, when I go to Chicago, if I try to get out by at least 3 o'clock, or Highway 55 becomes a parking lot, and I can just imagine, and that was the thing I was going to say, how congested that would be if you didn't have that mass transit.
Well, we move 2 million people. That's a sixth of Illinois every day. And we do it much more efficiently or at a lower cost to the state's road fund and transportation system than highways. And you just physically couldn't build that many highways. So the state, while it's an important player, is also in a need of a capital bill, an infrastructure bill. We have a little operating money for mass transit, but it's really infrastructure and capital that I'm down here really scouting. I need matching money like Indiana and Iowa and Texas for Donald Trump, President Trump's proposed $1 trillion infrastructure plan. And we have to have money to be able to match the federal government's $1 trillion.
What kind of a match do you need?
Generally, in many cases, it's half. Many of you saw that President Obama gave $1.2 billion for Red Line and Purple Line modernization in Chicago. That's the major artery. If you're a Cubs fan or a Sox fan, the Red Line goes to Comiskey Park or U.S. Cellular or Guaranteed Rate, whatever it's called these days, and Wrigley Field. But you got to have matching money for a lot of the federal monies. Indiana, the new governor of Indiana, Eric Holcomb, passed a gas tax. So that he has matching money. That's Governor Pence's running mate, now the governor of Indiana. Iowa just increased their gas tax.
Yeah,
matching money.
I was going to say, I was just a month ago, and in Indianapolis, and you look, they have their budget, state budget, as a $2 billion surplus, I think it is, and they just, as you alluded to, passed a funding mechanism for their highways for 20 years. I was shocked. I mean, that is talk about looking out and planning ahead. On your system, how much of your money, as you talk to lawmakers here, how much of your money currently comes from the state, and what are your other sources of income?
Very little operating money comes from the state. Most of it comes from fare boxes. 52% of the cost of mass transit comes from the riders. The federal government is a fairly large chunk. There is a regional sales tax, and I know the Illinois channel covers downstate, so if you're a downstate viewer watching this, it's sales taxes from the Metropolitan Chicago area. That is a large percentage of our budget. So, in rank order, it's the riders, it's the sales taxes, it's the federal government, and the state is just a little piece of it.
The capital money, and those who haven't dealt with these kind of budgets, that's for basically big infrastructure projects as compared to your operating money. So when we talk about a capital budget, and you alluded to a lot of the cars that people are riding need to be replaced, they're old. Would you look for a capital expenditure is it a maintenance capital budget, or would you be doing some expansion?
It's mostly maintenance. There is a $30 billion, and we can't do it overnight. It's over, a decade or longer, but a $30 billion backlog of state of good repair just to maintain what we have today. I ride Metro from my west suburban area to downtown Chicago every day to my law office, and the car I ride in was delivered when Dwight Eisenhower was the president. Again, 30% of what we have is past its useful life. The elevated we just removed a piece of an elevated structure in Chicago that was stamped Carnegie 1888 the other day. So we have an old system, and you've got to repair it. And when you invest $1 in mass transit, you get a $4 rate of return in private sector development. The Brown Line in Chicago, when it was renovated recently, ridership doubled, and every piece of property within a mile of the Brown Line went up 40% in value, which puts more money into your school funds and more money for police and fire. So where transit goes, the economy grows, and you got to take care of it. And Dallas gets it. There was a great quote out of Indianapolis the other day that I saw from a conference that the mayor of Indianapolis put on, especially with a millennial workforce that's approaching half of our workforce, our young people, graduates of the University of Illinois or DePaul or University of Chicago, Northwestern, to have and maintain millennials in your workforce. You've got to have a mass transit system. The millennials, they don't own cars like my generation did, and they rely on mass transit and Uber. And to have millennials, as the mayor of this conference in Indianapolis said, to have millennials work in your city or remain in your city, you have to have a mass transit system, and it's tantamount to trying to sell them a phone without a camera. Millennials demand mass transit. As tough as it's been economically in the state of Illinois, Chicago does lead America in corporate headquarter relocations over the last several years, and mass transit's a major reason that Google and McDonald's Corporation are moving their headquarters into the urban area of Chicago. But whether you're in Springfield or Carmi or Macomb, you benefit from a robust economy in Chicago through the general taxes of the state system. And when people are employed in Chicago, it's going to help pay for the schools in Rochester, Illinois.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, when we look at the state budget, the amount of revenue that comes in from Chicago, Illinois would be more like Tennessee if we didn't have Chicago as part of the state. Just before we close out, I look at one of the things that we have going for us as a country right now, and when we talk, as the president is talking about infrastructure rebuild, is that we have interest rates still at about a 60-year low. And while often for a lot of people borrowing is a bad word, I would say you need to reinvest in the infrastructure. We're driving over bridges that were built 50 and 60 and 70 years ago. So it seems to me if we're going to ever do the infrastructure, now's the time, because we can be borrowing on the capital markets at such low interest rates, right?
Right, and I'm fortunate at the RTA, we are fortunate to have a near perfect credit score with Wall Street. So we're borrowing at all-time record lows. We are borrowing, the state does owe, like it owes so many vendors. The state owes the RTA and our system almost $400 million. Unlike some vendors, I don't get paid interest by the state. I go out and I borrow, and it costs the ridership of the RTA region a couple $1 million to go out and borrow what we're owed from the state. But we have to have, as a state, matching money for President Trump's $1 trillion. And even if you don't take
the trillion is nationwide. I mean,
correct.
We'd have to come up with, we don't know what I don't think we know yet what the bill's not passed, right? But what Illinois would get, but we'd have to have roughly 50% of whatever they give Illinois.
And I just know, because I just did a forum with my counterpart from Phoenix, Arizona's ready to go. The chamber person from Indianapolis told me the other day they have their money set aside, and I know Iowa did a recent gas tax. You know, the gas tax, and I don't care where the revenue comes from. I'm not a lawmaker. I leave that up to people smarter than myself. They're talking about broadening out the sales tax in the state, and the RTA gets sales tax, a proportion of it, in the metropolitan Chicago area. But the gas tax in this state has not been increased. It's a set per gallon, not adjusted for inflation, since 1993. Which means that it essentially has 60% of the buying power the last time it was adjusted in Illinois, and it hasn't been adjusted for inflation since Jim Edgar was governor.
Yeah, and the other thing, which the National Chamber of Commerce has pointed out, that if you look at the miles per gallon that cars get today as compared to, say, 93, that the National Road Fund is getting a lot less money because we used to be getting, when you and I were in high school, we probably got 10 to 12 miles a gallon, and now we're getting maybe 30s in some cases.
You know, and folks that drive Teslas don't pay a gas tax. And I saw Governor Brown in California just requested a 13-cent gas tax increase, but he put on something called the Tesla tax, which is to require people that drive electric cars to at least contribute something to the road fund.
Kirk Dillard, we appreciate you taking the time and stopping by.
Thanks, sir.